everyone, hope you all are well. I'm starting today like every other day by prepping the eye area for the shadows that are to come, and to do that I'm using the Decay primer potion. I've added a few swipes of this across my eyelid, and now I'm using a Wet n Wild P12 blending brush just to buff this into the skin. And if you don't own a primer, you can just use a small amount of concealer followed by some powder to set that product in place, and then you're good to go. Good to go to apply your shadows on top of that powdery base that you've created. So my palette of choice today is the Urban Decay Born to Run eyeshadow palette. I love revisiting older palettes and you all seem to love it too, so that's what we're doing today. I'm starting off with the shade Still Shot. It's a gorgeous, bright, pinkish coral eyeshadow that has a matte finish to it. And I've picked this up on the tapered end of my double-ended brush that came with the Naked Cherry eyeshadow palette. Urban Decay are the only brand that I've come across that include a brush in the palette that's actually savage. I get great use out of their brushes. The shadow is nice and soft in texture, but in saying that, it isn't too powdery, which is great because it means it's very easy to work with. I don't have a problem with fallout, and I'm just using circular motions and windshield wiper motions now to blend this colour out, and I'm winging it out on that outer corner, blending upwards and outwards as I go. And as you can see, I've just taken up a second helping of this shadow. I'm adding a second layer to really amp up the intensity. And this shade is just going to act as a really nice transition shade for us today. I'm flipping my brush around now and I'm using that small bullet shaped end just to apply that same shadow down along the lower lash line. I'm starting on the outer corner and then looping the shadow up onto the lid so that it connects up nicely, and then I'm making my way all the way into the inner corner. So next then I'm taking the shade Hellride. This is a deep, beautiful matte berry shade. Again, it's another shade that can be a little bit powdery in the pan, but it applied nicely to the eyes and blended beautifully too, so I can look past that. I've began by using that same brush. I've just picked up a little bit of the shadow on the tips of the bristles. I've patted down on the outer third of the eye, and now I'm starting to swirl this colour up to and across the crease. So I'm taking a bit more shadow now on my brush. I've taken a more substantial amount than the previous time because it's been a while since I used this particular shadow, and being that it's powdery in the pan, I didn't know if I was going to get a heap of fallout or not. So I erred on the side of caution and I picked up a small amount first, and really that's the best way to apply your shadows. Build them up slowly and surely in light layers, and it will help make the blending process a bit easier and you'll get a better overall finish to your look too. So as you can see now, I'm just using a new brush. This is just a clean brush from Crown Brush, and I'm using this to soften the edges of that look. Then I'm using the bullet shaped end again to blend this shadow down along the lower lash line. A lot of people tend to steer clear of berry tones for fear they'll make the eyes look irritated, but I find you just need to apply them in the right way. So I'll always have a deeper colour at the waterline, or underneath the waterline, or sometimes both, but just so that there's a gap between the berry tones and the whites of the eyes. So it's a tip then to try if you usually stay away from these tones for that reason. As I've mentioned before, the fluffier the brush, the less product it'll apply, therefore the lighter the colour payoff. The more dense the brush, the more product it'll apply, the more intense the colour payoff. So that's why I'm reapplying a little of that berry shade now to the lid with the bullet end of that double-ended brush. I'm taking the eyeshadow Wild Heart now, which is basically like a pearlescent version of that previous shade. I've picked up some of this on a small pencil brush from Royal & Langnickel, and I'm tapping this shadow down to right next to that Hellride shade on the inner and outer portion of the eye, being mindful to keep that gap clear in the centre of the lid. And it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. We're still laying down the groundwork. I'm just mapping out the colours at this stage. We can go in and intensify them later on. So to really clean up that centre part of the eyelid now, I'm taking the L'Oreal Infallible Concealer in the shade 325. This is a fantastic full coverage concealer which I'll usually use to brighten up the centre of the lid nicely. I'm using a little C-shaped brush now from Vanity Planet to apply this shade, and I'm using the shape of the brush to my advantage here. I'm letting that do all the work. I'm tapping down onto the lid, raising my brush up to the crease and letting the shape of the brush sharpen up that edge. I'm then taking the lightest, brightest shade in the palette called Breakaway. It's a soft, light creamy beige shade that has a pearlescent finish to it. I've spritzed my brush with some setting spray, and I'm using the brush now to pat and sweep the shadow over the top of the concealer. To be honest, this brush just wasn't really doing it for me. It's had its day. So I'm switching now to a little pencil brush. This one is from Sigma, and I'm using that to apply some more of that shadow onto the lid. And the shape of the pencil brush too works better because it just allows me to get right up to that crease line without disturbing it. So I'm reapplying that Wild Heart shadow now, either side of the Breakaway shade, and as you can see, I'm sweeping over and back towards the centre of the lid on either side. I'm overlapping those two shades now to fade them nicely into one another. I do want a nice spotlight effect, but I don't want any harsh lines either. So I'm taking a little touch of Hellride on my crown brush, blending brush once again. I felt the berry shade could pop a little more, so I'm reapplying this. And this is why I say just get your colours on there first, map out your look, and you can always fine tune later on. So next then I'm taking the shade Jet, which is a dark black eyeshadow with a satin finish to it. And I'm using this to add a little depth and dimension to the look. So I'm applying this on the inner and outer corners of the eye with the use of a little C-shaped brush from Sedona Lace. I just want a hint of darkness now, nothing dramatic or overpowering, because I want the focus to be on those berry tones. But once I'm happy then with how that looks, I'm going to lightly sweep some of this shadow in the centre of the crease, just above where I've cut the crease, to pull everything nicely together. I'm now taking this retractable black cake liner from KVD Beauty. I'm placing this on the waterline, close my eye around the pencil, and I'm running it back and forward to coat both top and bottom waterline at the same time. Then I'm using this angled brush from Vanity Planet with a little more of that jet shade. I'm placing this brush right underneath the lashes and I'm pushing it up to that lash line, and then I'm pressing it down and wriggling it back and forward to lay down that shadow. And I'm doing this all the way along the lash line from outer to inner corner. And it does look a bit harsh and bizarre initially, but stick with it because we're going to blend it out now in a second. So I'm picking back up that bullet shaped end of my double-ended brush, and I'm using whatever excess product is on it just to fade out that black. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to apply some lashes. I'm using the Ritzy ones from Kiss. I've just rediscovered these recently and I'm really loving them. And then I'm using the Urban Decay Lash Freak mascara to blend my own lashes in with the false ones and to also coat the bottom lashes too. But then that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and I'll catch you all really soon.